Stories of Great Christians. From its radio studios in Chicago, the Moody Bible Institute greets its friends everywhere with Chapter 17 in the transcribed story of Florence Nightingale, the Lady with the Lamp. In yielding to public demand for more nurses and sending them to the Crimea, Sidney Herbert, British Secretary of War, dealt a blow to Florence Nightingale's authority. In an effort to soften the blow, Herbert had consigned the new party to Dr. Cumming, realizing that Florence would object to receiving additional nurses and oppose their coming. They were coldly received everywhere. Florence protested vigorously, offering to resign. As a result of her letter, Mr. Herbert recognized his fault, apologized, and begged Florence to stay on. She consented. But the party of newly arrived nurses was a source of much difficulty.
Florence, you heard what happened to Mr. Percy?
No, Selina. I haven't had much time to think about Mr. Percy. I've been on my knees most of the last 8 hours dressing wounds and sores.
Now you want to go to bed, and here I am bothering you with gossip.
Oh, I haven't the remotest intention of going to bed. I'll come into the office and tell me about Mr. Percy. I'll have to confess to being very curious.
Well, about a week ago, I noticed he'd suddenly disappeared. Now I hear he's gone back to England.
Well, that's a good place for him.
Oh, Flo, what a way to talk. And he was so enthralled over you before coming here. You know what he said about wanting to be your footman?
Oh, that was utter nonsense.
Well, it seems he couldn't bear the cold reception and your callous way of treating him. So he's run away.
Leaving the rest of the party stranded like so many Robinson Crusoes on a desert island.
Oh, speaking of desert islands, what have you heard from Mary Stanley at Kolali?
Oh, nothing directly. But I wonder about Mary, Selina. She wants to hire maids to do the hard work and leave her ladies free to tend the sick. I have a feeling that this lady system isn't going to work.
Who in the world will she get to serve as maids?
Turkish women, I presume. Personally, I don't approve of giving women in army hospitals too much leisure to do as they please. What results is that the nurses pet a few individual cases and get nothing done for the general good.
Liz Herbert says some of the women wrote asking for straw bonnets.
It's not surprising. Oh, well, enough of that. Here in this awful hospital, in the continual presence of death, it seems like a waste of time even to think about straw bonnets.
You know, Flo, I'm happy that Dr. Meyer found a post in a hospital at Smyrna. I believe he'll be of real service, don't you?
Oh, I think so, too.
Well, now that I've told you all my news, don't you have any for me?
Well, I have some news, all right, but it's not very pleasant.
Oh?
A nurse went out with one of the orderlies last night. She came in late while I was still up writing. It's a good thing I heard her. She needed a lot of help to get undressed.
You mean she'd been drinking?
Oh, no doubt about it.
Well, she can't do that sort of thing. The regulations state you've made the rules so clear about not going out and taking hard liquor.
She's one of the hired nurses from a London hospital.
Oh.
In London, she got into the habit of taking spirits. Now she can't give it up, it seems.
Poor thing. What are you going to do?
Well, there's only one thing I can do. Come in.
Why didn't you let me go out in the wards this morning?
Just a minute, Harriet. I'll see one at a time, please. Close the door.
I didn't do nothing.
You understand the regulations concerning permission to leave the hospital. Last night you had no permission to go out.
I didn't go out.
I found your cloak, Harriet, covered with dew when you came in. You may as well admit that you were out with an orderly and that you came in intoxicated.
I didn't have nothing to drink, Miss Nightingale. I just don't see how you can think why I've served this hospital so faithful I've scrubbed them nasty old floors.
You've been warned before. Last time I made it plain that the regulations had to be observed.
There's nobody can abide by them regulations. And if you try to hold these women to it, you'll soon find yourself with no one to do the work.
On what we do here hangs the reputation of women as army nurses. In fact, the whole reputation of nursing in general. And I'm determined that things are going to be done right or not at all.
But if a person's got a craving for liquor, no rule's going to take it away from her. You got a craving, so you just have to have a drink.
So last night you succumbed to the temptation and ended up intoxicated.
I won't do it again, Miss Nightingale. I'm going to turn over a new leaf.
Well, you won't do it again here at least. The warning I gave you last time apparently didn't suffice to keep you sober. So you're going home on the ship that leaves tomorrow afternoon.
Don't send me home, Miss Nightingale. I won't
I
ever
think a
do
day will be long enough for you to get your things together.
Miss Nightingale, you cannot. I don't do nothing so frightful bad, and I don't think it's fair to... Why, lots of nurses behave worse than I do.
I'm sorry, Harriet. A Turk will come for your luggage tomorrow morning. You're excused to begin packing. Besides troubles of this kind with nurses, I had another constant irritation. Bad news began drifting back from Kulali, where Mary Stanley was in charge. It was rumored that women under her supervision strolled around doing nothing but carrying notebooks in their hands. Mary's refusal to follow procedures which I had established were weakening my position in the Crimea. But just when I most needed help, two events occurred which were of great value to me in being able to continue the work that cried so urgently to be done. Selina, come in here quick.
What is it, Flo?
A letter from Mrs. Herbert.
Oh, really?
It has a message in it. A message from the Queen.
The Queen? Not our own Queen Victoria.
No one else.
And what does the Queen have to say to two earthly mortals like us?
Let me read it to you.
Oh, please do.
Now, this is Mrs. Herbert's part of the letter. She says, I got the Queen's message from Sydney. He was so pleased for you. He's been giving the Queen notices of your great work. And now she's responded.
Oh, how thrilling.
And here's what the Queen says herself.
Isn't it marvelous, Flo? A message from the Queen. What does she say?
If you let me read it, I'll tell you. She says, I will be pleased to receive accounts from you, Miss Nightingale, and from Mrs. Bracebridge, as I hear no details of the wounded.
She wants to hear from us.
And here's the best part of all. She sends a message to the wounded men to be given through me.
Wonderful. How good of her to think of them. And Flo, how impressed people will be to know that she's communicating through you.
She says she thinks of the soldiers constantly and wants them to have this message.
Oh, but how will you tell them?
Well, it can be printed in the papers.
Of course.
But I wish there was some more direct way.
Oh, why can't it be posted up in the hospital as a notice?
Yes, we could have that done too. And here's a thought. How about having the chaplains read it aloud to the men in the wards?
Oh, well, that's the best of all. To get it by word of mouth will make it more real to them.
Men, Miss Nightingale has given me a message for you who were wounded or who became sick in service. It's a message from the Queen. If you will give me your attention, I shall read the communication. Queen Victoria sends you this message. No one takes a warmer interest or feels more for your sufferings or admires your courage and heroism more than your Queen. Day and night I think of my beloved troops. So does the Prince. I send you this message knowing that our sympathy is valued by the noblemen who have fought valiantly for their country.
The Queen's interest and sympathy strengthened my position, as did another event of significance. Sidney Herbert communicated with the War Department concerning the wing of the hospital rebuilt at my direction. In due course, word came back saying the government officially approved of the action I had taken on my own, and the money I spent was refunded. The foul odor that filled the barrack hospital was worse than I'd smelled in any filthy slum anywhere in the world, and I'd been in some terrible places. This bad smell finally caused a Mr. Augustus Stafford to conduct a small campaign of his own. He was a gentleman from England who had come to carry on a private investigation of the notorious conditions said to exist at Scutari. He found things even worse than they'd been described. And one day he visited Dr. Menzies.
So I came to you, Dr. Menzies. I felt that you, as chief medical officer, should be able to do something about it.
I think you've come to the wrong officer, Mr. Stafford. This really belongs to some other department.
Dr. Menzies, you must be moved to take immediate action. Why, the lavatories are all clogged up. They're virtually useless.
Yes. They've been that way for some time, I know.
And at least half the dysentery cases suffer from diarrhea.
I know that, too. It's a rotten mess. But as I say, some other department... Now, I believe tubs have been placed in the halls, haven't they?
And those are overflowing, too. Obviously, the orderlies hate to empty them.
It isn't my affair to do it, however.
Suppose you did it anyway.
Why, I'd be pounced on immediately by some other department and told that it belonged to them, not to me. I'm not disposed to interfere.
Well, if you can't do anything, who can? I'm determined to see that something is done. Seems like somebody should have authority to hire a dozen men to clean this place out.
Well, you might see Major Sillery. He's the military commandant of the hospital. I can't promise you anything. It'd be up to him to say, of course. But you might see him.
All right, sir, I'll do that.
I wish I had something definite to tell you in this regard, Mr. Stafford. But after due reflection,
Major Sillery, I don't see why everybody makes such a mountainous business of this thing, when the remedy is so perfectly obvious. And it certainly requires immediate attention.
Well, we have to consider not only the need, but also the way to accomplish what's necessary within the scope of our regulations. We have certain orders, you understand, and this doesn't come under any category in my power to handle.
It doesn't. It doesn't come under anything in Dr. Menzies' category either, it seems.
That may very well be.
But couldn't you arrange for some special permission?
I don't see how. Besides, it's not just a matter of permission. There's the business of funds that has to be considered by those of us in charge of spending.
Would it cost such a lot?
Maybe not. But it would have to be advanced, and I have no authority to advance it from official sources. And surely you wouldn't expect me to pay it out of my own pocket.
Wouldn't the government repay you? I understand that Miss Nightingale was repaid for a wing that she had built at her own expense.
Oh, yes, I heard of that highly irregular incident. Still, you understand that I couldn't risk doing a similar thing. My family doesn't dine with cabinet ministers in London.
Well, all I can say is this condition is actually killing our men. And if those lavatories aren't cleaned...
What are you thinking of?
If they're not cleaned, I'll write a letter about this whole affair and have it read aloud in the House of Commons.
And so we conclude Chapter 17 in the transcribed story of Florence Nightingale, The Lady with the Lamp. This is another in the series of stories of great Christians, which come to you from the radio studios of the Moody Bible Institute in Chicago.